It's time for another furniture transformation. I'm going to turn this hall stand into this hall stand. Turned out pretty awesome, hey? So if you've ever wanted to lighten your timber furniture, this video is for you. Ready, set, go. Now the reason why this one's going to be a little bit different is because I'm going to be using a paint stripper. I'm going to strip the entire piece back so it is raw exposed timber so that I can restain it. Ordinarily, I would prefer to use a sander. However, given the detailed timber, I need to use a paint stripper to get into all the little nooks and crannies. But before I start working on this piece, I need to give it a clean, so here I am just giving it a good dust clean. Now there's so many different varieties of paint stripper out there, but today I decided to use this eco-friendly paint stripper so that I didn't need to wear a mask. It's environmentally friendly and it doesn't have any toxic chemicals. To me, it looks a little bit like yellow slime. I grabbed out my rubber gloves because although it doesn't have any toxic fumes, it is still toxic to your skin. And safety is always important. To apply the paint stripper, I just grabbed out a little paintbrush and I started painting it onto all of the places where I needed to remove the original stain. Some paint strippers will start to dry out reasonably quickly, so you do often need to work quite fast. But this video is a little bit deceiving because I'm not actually working this fast. It is sped up ×2. You do, however, need to work reasonably quickly. You also can't be too stingy and you need to apply a reasonably thick layer. Here, now I've got the scraper and I've started to scrape off the stain and the paint stripper. The reason why you need to work reasonably quickly is because you don't want the paint and the original varnish to start to harden again while it's got the paint stripper on. This means that you usually need to work in small sections, apply the paint stripper and then remove the paint stripper from that section, then move on to another section. I think sometimes the videos that you see online can be a little bit deceiving with paint stripper. Often you'll see the videos and all of the varnish will just come straight off, looks so easy. But in reality, usually it is quite difficult to strip with a paint stripper and remove all of the original stain. But don't get me wrong, there is the odd piece where the old stain and varnish does just come off like a glove, but it's not always the case. This piece, as an example, was quite slow and treacherous to remove all the original stain. This is me with the first coat and now I have a carbide scraper in my hands. The carbide scraper works amazingly well even when the varnish is hard and you haven't applied any of the paint stripper. You can usually take off the top layer with the carbide scraper, but in my experience, the carbide scraper also actually works quite well after you've applied the paint stripper and then removed as much as you possibly can with a scraper. Steel wool will also be your best friend when you're using a paint stripper. Once you've removed as much as you possibly can, you can then get the steel wool and go in and try and remove any excess of that paint stripper that you haven't been able to remove with the scraper. It's really good for getting into really tight spaces. You can use the steel wool with just water, or you can also use it with methylated spirits to give it a really good clean. And to make sure you've removed all of that original coat of paint stripper before you apply another coat of paint stripper, as it does often take multiple coats, or before you let it dry out and then start using your sander. I finished applying the first coat of paint stripper, I removed that, cleaned it, applied a second coat of paint stripper, and here I am with the scraper removing that second coat of paint stripper. At this point, it is starting to lighten up quite well. Really, I think time is your best friend when you are trying to strip a piece back to natural timber. Just understand that it is going to take you time. I went over the entire piece with the carbide scraper again, getting off all of the excess. Then it was time to give it a good clean to make sure there was no paint stripper residue left so that it would dry out nicely. I'm really not a very big fan of paint stripper. I prefer to sand my furniture any day. So if my piece of furniture doesn't have really intricate details, I do not get out the paint stripper unless I absolutely have to. I'll show you why, because this is what comes out of the paint stripper. This is what you're left with after completing a piece with paint stripper. How disturbing is that? But sometimes it really is a necessary evil in order to create the desired end result. And there's two types of people. There's paint strip lovers and then paint strip haters. Some people absolutely love using a paint stripper and it's actually really satisfying for them to use the scraper and scrape off that end result. So not everybody is like me and you might find out you love it. Now onto the sanding, which is the bit I actually enjoy. I do really love using my sander. I've got my orbital sander and I'm going over all of the large areas with the orbital sander that are easy to access. It's just easier to use the orbital sander than it is to try and sand this all by hand. If you're a real beginner, you might not have access to an orbital sander and you can do it by hand. It's just going to take you a lot longer. And if you're going to get into furniture restoration or DIY projects, the sander is definitely the first thing I would invest my money in. If you lie the piece down, it's a little bit easier to get to. So I've just lied it down so that I can use my sander with a little bit more power and not worry about pushing the piece over. If you are interested in learning more about furniture restoration, I have an amazing online membership called Rookie Painter Society. When you join as a member, you get access to an entire step-by-step online course in the back-end library of the membership. You also get access to me to be able to ask any questions, plus get a huge range of downloadable guides, including a tools checklist. If you want to learn more about Rookie Painter Society, just head to the description and there'll be a link in there that you can check it out. If you have a piece with intricate details like this one, you aren't going to be able to sand everything with the orbital sander, and you are still going to need to sand some bits by hand. And then once you finish all of that, you're going to start working your way up your sandpaper grits. I've finished the entire piece on an 80 grit initially. I then move onto a 120 grit and finish off with a 240 grit, so all of the timber is really nice and smooth. As I said, it really is quite a time-consuming project. You're not going to be able to expect to smash this out really quickly. In all honesty, this entire project took me about 10 hours to complete from start to finish, so it's definitely not a quick flip. You're just going to keep sanding until you feel like there's none of the original stain or varnish left. And then after all of the sanding is complete, you can choose how you would like to refinish the piece and what end look you would like to achieve. For me, this was a commission piece for a client, and I had another piece of timber in her home that I was trying to match this to. It had quite grey undertones, but also had white throughout. So I started off applying a driftwood stain and glaze over the entire piece. This gave me those grey undertones and removed a little bit of the orange that came through from the natural timber. This particular stain and glaze is really easy to apply. I just paint it on and then I wipe the excess off with a microfiber cloth. Most stains you can use quite easily. Some, however, you will need to use a wood conditioner so that you're going to get a nice even finish. There is some types of timber where when you apply a stain, it will soak into different places in a different way, and you may end up with really obvious dark and light patches of the stain. In those cases, a wood conditioner is necessary, but for this particular project, I didn't need to do that. Now you can see me applying the stain and glaze up a little bit closer. You'll be able to see how grey the undertones of this stain are and how it's changing the colour of the timber. To me, stain is just like paint in a way that when you apply it, it really changes the look and feel of the piece of furniture. And it's amazing that we have the opportunity to create whatever it is that we would like to create. And just like I did before, once I finished applying the stain in a particular area, I then went over with the microfiber cloth and wiped off any excess of the stain. I repeated the process over the entire piece until the color was what I was wanting it to be. I applied the stain, wiped the excess off, and then repeated over and over again. You can apply multiple coats until you get the desired end result. But once I finished applying the grey, I wasn't 100% happy with the colour. So I grabbed a microfiber cloth and grabbed a warmer colour stain, applying some of it on this plastic plate here. I then used the microfiber cloth to go over the entire piece and apply a little bit of this darker stain on top of the grey. And then once I was happy with the colour, I actually wanted to incorporate a little bit of white. As I mentioned earlier, I'm trying to color match this, and the piece I'm color matching to has quite a lot of white. I decided that I was going to apply a white wax top coat. This is a nice soft wax which gives me a little bit of a white finish, but also gives me that top coat with a protective layer. Once again, using a microfiber cloth, I don't know what I would do without these. I grab some of the wax and then I apply it on top of the timber. I'm going to do this over the entire piece and apply a couple of liberal layers, so quite a fair bit of that white, just so that I get the overall white feeling in the end. I moved the piece inside my house and placed it in the staging location so that I could apply this wax top coat, just because it's so cold where I am at the moment and it's a little bit nicer to work inside in that warm environment. Once I finished waxing, I just added some beautiful home decor elements and this is the end result. What do you think? I'd love for you to let me know in the comments down below. And if you're not already, I would love if you could subscribe to my channel. It enables me to create these amazing videos and share what I love with you.